All right, family, we are back with another dose of the sunny side view. And I have two amazing women that are here with me today. I have the Linda Moon, who will be introducing herself in a bit. And I also have the Dr. Yulee Lee. Everyone knows I love educated women of color. So y'all know when I say doctor, y'all know that's like to my heart. So I'm super excited to be with these ladies and really to share and learn, really learn from them about Asian Pacific Heritage Month, which we are celebrating this month. So Linda, would you like to introduce a little bit about yourself? Give us a little elevator speech about who you are and what you do?
Yes, I always get very nervous at giving these elevator pitches because I never know where to start. So yes, I guess I'll start with what I do. So I am the director of Grow Kids curriculum at our company that we all work together at,
Yes.
Stuff You Can Use. That's where I oversee basically all the kids content that go out from our curriculum. It's super fun, incredibly challenging, but also in a very fun way. So we're kind of around the season where we're launching our latest volume. So it's a bit hectic, but again, these are all very fun challenges that we like to surround ourselves with. And when I'm not working on curriculum, I am an associate pastor and director of education at our immigrant church over here in California. I'm also a mom of two boys, 9 and 5. So on the whole, I am very busy.
Of course you are. We are. That's amazing. Thank you for introducing yourself. Dr. Yulee Lee, would you like to give us your elevator speech as well?
All right. Well, Sunny, thanks so much for having me and the both of us. You're on your way to becoming a doctor too, right, Sunny?
I am. Please continue to remind me because
I don't know if this is important, but I have a doctorate too.
What?
So then we can all
Linda,
just bask
you
in
should have
this
interrupted
funness.
me. Are you kidding me?
No.
I have to edit
I'm
it.
not on the level of Yulee though.
Oh my gosh, no. The reason why I started like that was because I was gonna say Sunny's on her way to becoming a doctor and Linda is also a doctor.
Oh my goodness. Linda, I did not know this. You know, I figured it out from Yulee because she signed her name and it said PhD afterwards. And I was like, oh, from now on, you're Dr. Yulee. So now you're Dr. Linda.
Dr. Yulee.
Dr. Linda and Dr. Yulee and almost Dr. Sunny.
Look at this. We are in good company.
Yes.
I love it so much. All right. So, well, I also work at Stuff You Can Use as our chief operating officer. And what that means day to day is that I get the privilege of making sure that our business is running smoothly, that we are making money, that we are creating products that really are helpful and that serve our users.
Yeah.
And also that our team that we've assembled is flourishing in the roles they're in and the work that we've been given to do together. And so that's sort of kind of the breadth of what I hold at Stuff You Can Use. And then I do a lot of side projects. You know, like women of color, we do a lot of things. Like
we do
a lot of side hustles.
We
like,
sure do.
I know. And so I am ending a season of adjunct teaching. So I was an adjunct professor at Wheaton College Graduate School for the past several years, but I'm ending that season so that I can enter into another season of side hustles that include really focusing in on how I can best leverage my position and power and experience to date in serving Asian American women in different spaces and various organizations that I am attached to, which we can talk about later as well. But when I'm not doing those things, just like Linda, I have a son. He is 18 years old. He is on his way to college this fall, so I will be an empty nester soon.
Oh my goodness.
Along with my husband, and we've been married, gosh, I think 20 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And we live in the Chicagoland area.
I love that. Oh my goodness. So shout out to you getting ready to become an empty nester. We say that, but I just moved our daughter who just finished her freshman year at college. We just moved her back home. So they don't ever leave. So they won't be there every day. I was actually using her room as my podcast room. And now I'm just on the kitchen table once again. So they don't ever leave.
Thanks for that heads up so that I can be prepared for the return.
So don't revamp his room just yet.
Yeah, okay, I won't. Thank you. I'll have you both to thank for this.
Yes, I love this. So thank you. Thank y'all for introducing yourselves. I wanted to kind of get into some specific questions. And just so you can share, with our friends and everybody who listens and shares. Can you all share a little bit about your particular Asian Pacific heritage and how it has helped your identity and experiences? Now, I will say, I've been asked this question, as a Black woman, and it was irritating to me because I felt like I always have to defend or always have to have this conversation. But then once I started getting into academia, I realized sometimes people are genuinely asking because as they're building up as advocates, just wanting to know like firsthand experience. So I started to respect it a little more. So I want you guys to know that all of these questions that I'm asking is in a mode to learn more. So if there's anything that I ask that's like, nope, I'm not answering, you have complete autonomy to tell me to mind my business. So let me know. But yes, so if you want to share anything about your Asian Pacific heritage, how it has shaped your identity and your experiences.
Yeah, go for it, Linda.
Well, I will begin by saying that sometimes I feel ashamed to say that I know surprisingly very little about my heritage and Korean history. And I don't think it's just plain ignorance. I think it was kind of a learned ignorance because a lot of us growing up were more focused on assimilating and just becoming more mainstream as much as possible. I mean, Koreans are one of the ones who were kind of under the umbrella of the model minority myth, right? So it was all about working hard and trying to strive. And so we knew we were profoundly Korean and very different and very much other, but it wasn't something that we were taught to be very proud of, more like aware of, but not like to the extent that the pride is now. So I think, yeah, because like growing up being Korean wasn't something we celebrated as like, oh my goodness, I'm Korean, right? It was like, for example, Korean food nowadays, I mean, so many people tell me how much they love Korean food. And it's like, oh my goodness, bulgogi, bibimbap, kimchi, I love it all, right? But all of that stuff was the stinky thing we tried to hide from our non-Asian friends, right? So it's a very big shift in the way we view. So to me, the heritage question is a very complicated one because I think it's kind of evolved over the years. But I think the way I see it now is kind of like, I feel like there's been a loss throughout my life that I'm trying to reclaim and trying to understand more now. So I think that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dr. Yulee.
Yeah. Like what was the root of kind of my own experiences with anti-Asian racism growing up is like now cool. And that is very strange to me, but also like redemptive in a way. And so I really resonate with what Linda said. I also, as I was reflecting on my, Korean heritage, I was born in Korea, South Korea, but I came to the United States when I was 3 years old. So, there wasn't much that I personally held on to or preserved from my own knowledge, but I was very close to my grandparents growing up, and especially my grandfather, and he would consistently tell me stories about the Korean culture, or like what he thought was important for me to know as I was growing up as a Korean in America. And so one of the things he emphasized a lot was respect for elders. And this is, a heritage thing that I think, is very prominent in the Korean culture, but perhaps others in the East Asian cultures can relate to this also. But and I think younger generations now in South Korea are much more, or becoming more individualistic and independent, but like that respect for the elders was a very important piece of my growing up that became a part of my identity, which is also related to me being raised in part by my grandparents as well. And so I think that now, as an older person, I'm actually the oldest person at Stuff You Can Use. I'm the oldest employee. It's not so much that I have that same expectation on others younger than me, but I think for me, whenever I see somebody older than I am, Korean or not, I generally have a respect for the life that they've lived, for the wisdom that perhaps they hold, and the stories that, they could tell that I can learn from. And so, that has become a part of who I am and how I see elderly people around me. And so I think that's one part of it. Another part that's related to that is like, Koreans, at least my family, we like engaged in a lot of ancestral like rites sort of ceremonies, where, we would remember the people in our family who had passed, and who had died years and years ago. And we would go to their graveside, and there'd be like the ceremony of like pouring Korean soju, which is like alcoholic drinks, and like bringing like foods and things, and sort of like kind of engaging in like a feast together, in a way. And I always thought this was very strange, and I kind of felt like I was not being a good Jesus follower by doing this or participating. However, what I really appreciate about this is that I've really come to appreciate and recognize the work and the sacrifice of my ancestors, and it's kind of given me like motivation to do more research into my own ancestral history, and into who these people are, so that I can celebrate them, not just blindly but knowingly, around who they are. And so those are, a couple of connected things regarding elderly or people who have gone before me, that are part of the Korean heritage that have become a part of who I am today also.
I feel like I need to corral everybody at Stuff You Can Use to call you Unni now. Which is like our honorific term of big sister.
Really? What is it called? Unnina?
Yeah, Unni.
Unni. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so we'll all call you Yulee Unni or Yulee Nuna for the guys.
That. No, hearing both of you talk, Dr. Linda, when you were talking, I started thinking about how triggering the question about heritage is for a lot of Black Americans specifically, because that disconnect between where your family is from, where your ancestors and all of those generations before are from, and then that loss of time, those 400 years where your name wasn't worthy to be written down, trying to figure out now, what is my heritage. So I definitely resonate with that. just how there are a lot of people, especially people of color, who just don't know. There's lots of things that occurred horrifically in this country that, we just don't have all of that. And so then when we do, like you mentioned, some of the things, it's like, I used to be so embarrassed that I had to put grease in my hair. And like my classmates were like, ew, grease. So like all of these little things that, and now, we look on, the Paris walkway and we see these, these hairstyles that came from African women. And now they're like, they used to be not professional. And now they're like, everybody's getting them. So you're right, Yulee, I'm right with you. I'm like, kind of on one hand, I'm like, yes. On the other hand, I'm like, okay. And the same. I was raised the same. I think, I was raised. My parents worked, so my grandmother lived in the home, so she was the one that picked us up from school, made sure we did our homework, fed us, while our parents were working. And I remember, I have when people meet my kids. My kids are, old school. So they're always like, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And people are like, oh, you don't have to call that. And they're like, I don't understand. Like, what does that mean? So just like culturally being raised in a home where they hear me still address my mother like that. If my mom called right now, I'd be like, can you guys hold on 1 second? Like, let me double check, make sure she's okay. But I think you're right. However, I think, and maybe Linda, you may know about this from working with so many young people as well, but I feel like right now there is, instead of asking an older person, and instead of, we call them like seasoned saints, that's what we like to call them, but instead of like asking a seasoned saint, these kids just go to Siri. Last night, my daughter, I was like, oh, I don't know why, the sun rises at this time. And my 5-year-old was like, let's ask Siri. I remember having, what was it called? Britannica? What was the encyclopedia book?
Encyclopedia,
right?
yeah.
I had to like buy that book.
You had to buy the entire volume.
The entire volume to figure out.
And you had to get it updated because they would update it every year.
It was wild. And you like really thought you were doing something if you had one of those encyclopedias within like the last 5 years. You were like, oh yeah, this is top notch, right?
Yes, I have the most updated information.
Yeah, so I feel like that, again, that disconnect with the generations is, instead of going to my grandmother, I can just ask Siri. It's this technological, I don't know what it's called. It's just this moment where kids are like, oh, I can just look it up. So it's a good thing and a bad thing, but yes, what we're seeing.
I do think it's a big cultural shift because I'm noticing this a lot in, our millennial second gen Korean Americans is kind of trying to move away from a lot of what they perceive to be more toxic, authoritarian ways of growing up. And so they're trying to reverse that paradigm. And so we're kind of on the other end of the spectrum with our kids. And so even the way, millennials as a whole across the board are just being mocked for the way we raise our kids. Yeah, but sure. I think when it comes to Korean culture, it's kind of like, oh yeah, don't listen to what grandma said. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, we're not trying to abolish their influence or anything like that, but we are acknowledging, even from like a parental point of view now, that like maybe what they're saying is outdated. So maybe let's listen to what modern science has to say, or like what we think to be true. So then I think from that, it stems from that, and then it goes down to our kids who are like, oh, maybe I don't need to look for an older, wiser person. Maybe I can find this on my own. And so I see that happening a lot for sure.
Yeah, I think what you just mentioned, my parents think that ginger ale solves every sickness. So they're like, oh, you just need to go get ginger ale. Like if I have a tummy ache, my daughter, she wasn't feeling well. I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to the store. I'll get like a kid's Pepto-Bismol. They're like, no, just get her some ginger ale. She'll be fine. So you're right. My parents think that solves everything. And my grandmother would tell me to take a shot of gin. So
it goes from gin to ginger ale.
I love your grandmother.
Evident, Yulee, evident. So let me ask y'all, have you faced any unique challenges or barriers as Korean women in your professional careers, and how have you navigated them? And I know we may not be talking about necessarily where we work now, but, you know, coming up, both of you again have, you know, higher academic degrees, you know, coming up in that professional realm. Are there any unique challenges or barriers that you all saw that you had to address or wish you addressed?
Yeah. This particular question is, I'm very passionate about answering it because I think that, you know, every time I share my experiences, so many women, Asian American or not, resonate with, you know, what I'm about to say. But first, I'll share two experiences that have been repeated in organizations. The first being, you know, I think as a Korean American, and perhaps, you know, this can be generalized across Asian Americans, but, you know, we tend to look on the younger side. And I think for me particularly, I, you know, have been always a girl who likes to get highlights in my hair. You know, I like to wear certain kinds of fashion and clothing that I think is cute and pretty, or more on the feminine side. And I've learned over the years that everybody except myself has a problem with how I dress or how I want to present myself in the workplace. Some of my presentation I cannot control. Like, I can't control sometimes that, you know, I might look like a college student or something. Hey, you know what? We have great jeans, and I was lucky to get young looking jeans from my however, I have been told by usually male colleagues that, you know, I should cut my hair shorter, that it's quite too long.
The audacity.
Yeah, that I should have a shorter haircut, and that I should get rid of my highlights, because it just is not very professional, especially in the higher education space. I've been told this directly. I've also been told directly that I should perhaps wear pantsuits to work, so that I can be more respected by my peers in the workplace. And so I think that, you know, these kinds of sexist statements and experiences probably cross beyond being a Korean American woman. But my experiences in particular have often revolved around like how I look. Yeah. I think, you know, with Asian American women, there is, you know, this exoticism, you know, Orientalism that is attached to our sexuality, which has been perpetuated by, you know, media and movies and that industry as well. And so, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these statements, especially from men, came from some stereotypes that they had in their minds, and, you know, wherever those were formed. So that's one. The second is that, you know, you all know that I am an Enneagram 8. Enneagram 8s are, you know, honest, and sometimes we like to be very blunt with how we state things, with how we give feedback, etc. Typically, I give people a warning, even when people are hiring me. I say this outright, like, hey, I really prefer honest and direct communication. This is the kind of communication that I will be providing, especially if I don't think something is, you know, going in the direction where people are flourishing, or where if people are being like oppressed in the system, you will hear about it from me. Typically, the response I get, even in interviews, is, we love that so much. Like, we want that. We want people like that on our team. I enter into the organization, and then I start talking, and I usually get one of two responses. The first being, oh, you know what, like, that is a little bit too aggressive for space right now. Like, you're new and that's a bit too aggressive, so can you wait a little bit, or just figure out a different way of talking, basically.
Or be quiet. That's what they really mean.
Or be quiet. Or just be silent. Like, don't say anything. And then secondly is, like, that's not how I typically experience you. Like, I'm so angry right now. And, in these situations, I'm often like, you know what? Like, I have multiple sides to my personality. I am not some boring person where in every meeting I'm going to be, quiet or soft-spoken. There are some days where I'm just going to be straight up angry about something and you will know about it.
Yeah.
This is what it is to bring your whole self to work, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so, those are some of the experiences that I've had in the workplace that, that have really traumatized me to some degree, and are areas that I'm, working really hard to prevent others from experiencing whenever I'm in positions to do so.
Now, is there like a slogan that you have in your community or your culture for looking younger? Like, we say Black don't crack, right? So is there like, is there a slogan?
There is. I think it's Asian don't raisin.
I think that's what I heard too.
I love that. I love that. That is the best thing I've heard probably all week.
That was super cringe to me when I heard it, but I was like, seems like a compliment. We'll take it.
It's accurate. It's very accurate. I love that. No, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your experiences and the intersectionality of showing up as a woman and a woman of color in any space where people think that they're better than you. I have to say that it's comedic relief, because after I'm finished like blazing and being angry, I just laugh because I'm like, this is just ridiculous. You really think you're better than me because of tools that you have in your pants? Ridiculous. I love that. So, okay, let me ask you, how can you share a significant moment or experience that made you particularly proud of your Asian Pacific heritage? Is there a moment where you were like, "Ooh, I love this"? Was it whatever? We have lots of different moments, so it may not be one particular thing, but was there any moment that was kind of like your aha cultural moment?
Ooh, I feel like for me, it's been a slow burn because like I was saying in the beginning, there was just a lot of what I now realize was this kind of quiet rejection of my heritage growing up. Not intentionally so, but I now realize that's what I was doing. And so when it kind of felt like, after a certain amount of time, it's okay to be Korean. It just kind of felt like this cultural shift to me. And so because I remember like in college, I made it a point of not befriending Korean people on purpose, just because I was just so burned out with dealing with just some of those cultural intricacies growing up, because most everyone in my community all throughout that point had been Korean, whether it was church or school, etc. And then it just kind of felt like, we're slowly starting to realize that Korean culture is getting a little bit more visibility in the media or in press. And I do think BTS has a lot to do with this. But in terms of food, like we're seeing like food trucks that have like Korean fusion elements, and a lot more Korean celebrities coming into notoriety. And so I think that for me, it wasn't like this moment where like, okay, now I'm really proud of what we're doing, but it's kind of like, I knew this was always a part of me, but I feel like now I can say it out loud. That's kind of how it felt.
Yeah.
I know that when I was younger, we had this thing when we were in high school, because we were all dumb then. We would all pretend we were like, we were all in some sort of gang, and we'd be like, oh yeah, Korean pride. But it was never like an actual Korean pride, right?
Yeah.
It was just us saying like, oh, we have this identity and we want to let you know we do, but we're not actually going to specifically name things that we're proud of, you know?
Yeah.
If anything, we're going to hide all those things that make us uniquely us. But now I just feel like, and so I'm kind of proud of that evolution or the arc. And so it's not like this one defining moment in history, but like I would say maybe starting with like the Olympics in Korea in 2002 for me. I think that was a big one because we got a lot of visibility then, and I know it did like really great things for the South Korean economy as well. But from that, I think more travels, more social media, all of that thing has made it accessible for people to really dive deeper into Korean culture and traditions. And then now that it's just more widespread, I think that's kind of something that I am definitely really amazed by.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Yulee?
My answer is going to be so funny, but
love it.
Well, I at least to me, I'm usually in my household, I'm the only one who laughs at my own jokes and stuff. But it's what Linda mentioned about BTS. I think I was like really proud to be Korean when I saw the K-pop boy band group BTS like winning awards in America, or like, whatever, Grammys or whatever the musical awards are.
Yeah,
I think I was like really, really proud to see on stage with like, or in like an arena with like superstars, in America. When they did the like karaoke thing with, I don't know, what's his name? The karaoke in the car with
James Corden, right?
Corden, that's it.
Yeah, James Corden, and when they were on those like, nighttime shows with like
they did something with Jimmy Fallon.
Like I really was like genuinely proud to be Korean when I saw BTS, the K-pop group, just getting that well-deserved spotlight and applause and awards. And so I think my proud moments are as an adult are connected to BTS.
I love that
in a strange way, but a cool way for me.
I love that. No, you guys have great ones. I think I grew up in a predominantly white suburban area, and so I was like one of one in all of my classes. I never had a Black teacher, but I remember like the movie Malcolm X had come out, and y'all, I thought I was in the Black Panthers. Like I was like, my hair makes sense, which was definitely interesting to navigate in an all-white area. But the intellect that Malcolm X had and how he presented himself, I mean, it made me just want to read books. So it was, it was like that moment where I was like, yes, we're here. So yeah, I love hearing about like BTS and all. Are there like other K-pop groups? Like I know nothing about K-pop. My daughter is heavy into musicals, so I never really hear about other additional music. But I always think about, when we get these superstar groups, I think about how many groups are there that are kind of known, but just aren't as well known as maybe like the one who got to the top. So is it like, is there like an overwhelming amount of K-pop groups or not so much?
Well, I mean, I also like Blackpink. They're
big.
More women in it, and they are really big. I think they are sort of like the parallel or whatever the right word is to but an all-female group. Right now, a group that's super popular, I think, is called New Jeans, and they are also an all-female K-pop group, but they're younger, like a different generation.
Okay.
And they're so cute, and they're so much more younger than I am, but I just love them so much.
Yes.
They're so but I do think they are gaining popularity, or have already, in America.
No, I love that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's going to bring me to my next question. I was going to ask if you all could recommend some books or authors or podcasts that highlight Asian Pacific voices. So music would have been great. So if you want to drop some musical people for us to follow as well, how can we find some of, how can we diversify our reading, our listening? How can we do so?
You want to go first, Linda?
Yeah, sorry, I was like trying to hold in my cough.
I want everybody to know that every meeting I'm in with Linda, she is eating something normally. So this is completely normal.
They do usually get me right around my lunchtime. It's uncanny how that happens so often. But thanks for bearing with me. So I think there's just a lot out there. There's but not focused enough. I feel like a lot of it has been just some general things we should know about Asian American culture or Asian American experiences, but a lot of them do lean towards like one culture over another. And so I felt like for most of the times when I was seeking out Asian American sources, a lot of them are Chinese or Japanese, like a significantly large number of them. And it makes sense because they were here in the States longer, and so they have more roots. So I'm just going to recommend the last thing I read that I thought was really powerful, which was Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner of the band Japanese Breakfast, which I devoured. And I mean that kind of in a pun kind of way, because a lot of her book talks about food. Oh, wow. And food. I think it was a memoir to her late mother, and just about how she kind of had to navigate her identity as being half Korean. And she talks a lot about her experiences in Korea with Korean relatives and learning how to make Korean food. And so a lot of it is just so relevant, I think, and it's just captured in a very real way, not like, oh, here are just some things you need to know about Korean culture, but more so like this is everyday Korean life that a lot of us living in the States can relate to. And kind of like a subsect of that is she talks about this Korean YouTube chef named Mangchi. And she has a lot of her Korean recipes. I used to watch her a lot too. But then like, again, this is the part of me that's like kind of a little averse to my heritage, is like, I couldn't stand her accent. And not because like, I'm like, oh my goodness, why do you have an accent? But because to me, I felt like it was being played for laughs and it was very theatrical. Yeah. And I didn't like that. It didn't feel authentic. I don't really know her story, so I don't know if it is. But I was actually very impressed with her whole premise, because she does not only show how to make these dishes, but she also talks about the relevance and the significance. So it's like, oh, this is something that we use in certain ceremonies, and this is something that we recommend for women after they gave birth. And so she provides context, and I thought that was actually really helpful. So those are the two things that I would recommend.
I love that. Thank you. Yulee, do you have some recommendations?
Yeah, okay. When I was thinking while Linda was talking, and gosh, I am so picky. Well, I agree with Linda's recommendations, first of all. Secondly, I was thinking, okay, I want to recommend people who are not necessarily out there to build themselves a platform. I also want to recommend people who I personally know in like friendship as well as like in professional spaces, and I've seen them hold like integrity and character like in all spaces that I've been in with them. because that is really important to me. So non-platform building, but people should know who these people are and should follow them. The first is this lady named Yulee Lee and she is the executive director of Isaac, Innovative Space for Asian American Christianity. Yeah. She's an author. You can find her books on Amazon. She also co-hosts a podcast called When Women Preach. And she is a seasoned saint, as you would call her, I think, Sunny. She has so much experience, and she's an older Korean American woman who has really spoke a lot of life into me personally. And I really respect her, and she's had a lot of traumatic experiences herself, you know, in different professional spaces, etc. And so I think she's worth learning from and checking out. You know, check out her. Check out Isaac on. You can Google it and you'll find it, ISAAC. So she's one. I think another woman who I would recommend, her name is Pastor Yulee Lee. She's co-pastor of a church here in Illinois called Life on the Vine. And she is also the board chair for Missio Alliance, which is an organization that put on a conference recently that Stephanie can sponsor. And Juliet is also somebody, if you Google her, you'll also find her on a lot of different YouTube videos, because she was a panelist for, you know, different organizations, and she's out there a lot talking and preaching and doing great work. But you know, she's not always posting about it herself. But I feel like people need to know about her and learn from her. Just so wise and such a great leader. So yeah, those are the two women I would recommend people follow.
I love how you put your friends on. That's right. That's what you should do. Put the people
we
you know
need more of that. We need more of that, especially among Asian American women, I think, because I don't know if this has been your experience too, Yulee, but I think for me, there's a lot of contention among, especially, I'll just speak for my context, for Korean American women, where we're really proud of them when they do well, but we're also slightly very jealous and spiteful, and we kind of hope they fall on their faces. You know, it's just kind of part of the culture where we're like, yay for elevating the culture, but why is it her and not me? And you know, this could partially be the fact that I'm an Enneagram 3, but also we're just, you know, we're taught to be the leaders of the pack. You know, you have to rise to the top. So the fact that someone is doing better than you in anything is just not acceptable, and it just kind of causes these points of contention. And so I love that you are promoting people you know personally, and that you can actually be like, I stamp of approval these people, you know.
And everybody should follow Linda Moon. She has a podcast.
Geez. And Yulee Lee.
But all of the things.
That's encouraging.
No, Linda, I'm glad you said that. I actually think that is that's trauma from the way that we've been treated historically.
Absolutely.
You know, just thinking about, from my context, putting those who have been free to those who are still enslaved, or pitting them against one another. That's a historical trauma that we are yet dealing with. And so I see it play out today as, you know, in my context, where it's, oh yeah, that was cute, but I could have did it better, instead of, oh my goodness, imagine what we could do together, you know? Yeah, I think I think that is something from people of color. And then when you add the intersectionality of being a woman, if you start adding class into it, education, it becomes, you know, it grows bigger and bigger, when in reality, I think that's what I've always tried to instill is like, hey, look at all the things we can do together. You know, we can put more hands to the plow. We can do so much more. So I definitely agree with you, Linda, and thank you, Yulee, for putting your friends on. We like to see that. So as we kind of start to wrap up, I have two questions left for you. One, what advice would you give to younger Asian Pacific individuals who may be struggling with their identity or facing cultural barriers? What advice would you want to give? And it may not necessarily be younger, but just coming into that moment where they're struggling with their identity and facing cultural barriers. What advice would you give?
That's a good and hard question.
What would you want to tell little Yulee?
Yeah. You know, I think I would say to find that courage that, you know, we all have within us, to face whatever fear or insecurity or imposter syndrome we feel internally about who we think we are or who we think we're not. I think that sometimes when you know, we struggle to, at least me personally, when I struggle to kind of understand parts of who I am, you know, I will either kind of put it aside for another day. Like, oh, you know what, this part of my life doesn't really make sense, or it was kind of like a little bit too traumatic for me to kind of follow it for now, because I have these other important things that I am doing or that I'm pursuing. However, these other important things I've realized don't ultimately end up the way that I would want them to, because I haven't fully reflected or gotten the proper counseling or, you know, had the appropriate conversations that I need to have regarding parts of who I am that need that attention, you know. And I think facing these areas where, you know, we're still trying to figure out like who we are, or areas of insecurity or doubt or whatever, or trauma even, I think it requires us to like turn toward ourselves, or toward and inward, to do a rediscovery maybe, of who we are and who, you know, God wants us to be. And so I would say that, you know, the work is hard. I think doing that internal work is really challenging. But to have the courage to face ourselves and to work, and to do that work so that whatever we produce externally is a reflection of our true selves. I think that's what I would say.
I love that. The courage to face ourselves. That was beautiful. Linda, what about you? What would we tell little Linda? Little Linda.
Oh my goodness. So many things I would love to tell little Linda, but not all related to identity. I think a lot of our barriers today comes from being indifferent. And I think it's not just indifference for indifference sake, but I think it's kind of, you know, that whole maxim, I know this has been tossed around a lot, but, you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. But in most Asian contexts, it's more like the quacking duck gets shot, you know? So it's more like, keep your head down, don't make noise, don't make waves, just do what you're told. And maybe you'll get acknowledged and maybe someone will listen to your complaints. And so I think that has been something that has been culturally deeply ingrained into the way we operate. So even now, I think, like Asian American rights or activism, all of that stuff is fairly new. And even so, it's not getting a lot of traffic, right, or attention, because the majority of the demographic is just kind of like, can you just not? Like, can you just keep your head down? Can you stop causing problems for us? And so I think I don't really have a concrete advice in that other than let's care more. But I do think there is a need for us to realize we are in this together. There needs to be more solidarity. There needs to be more anger and just more incredulity at the things that are happening that causes us to move forward and make actual change, rather than somehow, somewhere, somebody will fix this in society, because that has never been the case. And so that is something that I would maybe call all of us to do and just be more intentional about.
I love that. Not silencing our voices. Thank you, Linda. Okay, last question. How can a non-Asian Pacific individual be a better advocate and supporter of the community, not just during this month? So I feel like a lot of times we do really performative things. We celebrate a month, we celebrate Black History Month, and then it's like, all right, forget that. Put those flags away and let's move on. But how would you all say, hey, this is a way that you can be a better advocate, not only during this month, but also every day, 365 days?
Yeah. Well, I think, when I think about being a better advocate or ally, like, every or throughout the year or whatever for somebody, it's really like showing up. Showing up and taking action consistently, I think is really important. And, I think that requires commitment to not just a cause, but to a person or to a people. And so, that performative thing that you mentioned, Sunny, like I've seen that also be expressed in different workplaces when people want to look like they are, I don't know, progressed in their knowledge of race relations or something, and they'll like start to say something in their own understanding of what advocacy is, without even really knowing who I am or understanding the context of what's going on. And so I would say, first, like, get to know Asian Americans, get to know, your coworker, if they are Asian American, on a personal level, be proximate, know our struggles, know our history. I think, Asian American history is one that is not known very well by a lot of people, including Asian Americans. And so, I think we all have to study history together. But yeah, know us so that you know how best to then come alongside. And, oftentimes that is speaking up with us or taking some action with our communities as well. So, and if you see somebody like an elderly person getting attacked on the streets, please help. Don't just
and it's crazy we even have to say that. Like, that makes no sense that we even have to say that. But yeah, you're right. Ridiculous. You just made me angry. I'm like, why do we even have to say this? That's so crazy. Thank you, Yulee. Linda?
Yeah, I think I'll just kind of latch onto something Yulee said about knowing us, is that a lot of times people who are non-Asian know not that many Asians. And so they will kind of extrapolate that one person and then kind of project them onto every single Asian.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question I get asked a lot from non-Asian friends are, is that a cultural thing? You know, well, they'll be like, oh, my coworker did such and such. Is that a cultural thing? I'm like, no, that's an individual so-and-so's thing, right?
Yeah.
So I do think, I mean, Yulee mentioned Asian history is really not well known by mainstream. And it's also so big and so varied, right? Because how many different Asian lines are there, right? I mean, that was my biggest pet peeve growing up, would be like, hey, are you Chinese? Are you Japanese? I'm just like, are you gonna do this like 183 more times? Like, there are so many different Asian I could be. But I do think there is a need for us to realize that it's a very complex group of people, and that not only are we individuals, you know, but each of us have a different lens by which we experience life and our society and community. So I think it's really helpful that we don't make these generalizations and assume, yes, I got a handle on Asian American culture, because we will all tell you, even Asian Americans don't have a handle on Asian American Pacific Islander culture. Like, we're still very much lost ourselves. So it would be really helpful to have friends who are exploring all of these things with us.
Yeah. You know, I was talking to my husband about, I grew up in the Midwest, and then I lived South for a while. And then I moved to the East Coast. I moved to New York City. And it wasn't until I got to New York City, where I already had 2 children. I was over the age of 25. And it was there that I realized, even though I probably had heard it in passing, that I realized not every Hispanic person was Mexican. Like, it literally blew my mind. And I was like, wait, you're not. And I remember one of my friends saying, I'm not Mexican, I'm Dominican. And it was the first moment where I was like, oh yeah, like, there isn't just one group of people. There's no monolith there. And there's totally different customs, totally different ways of speaking Spanish. Like, it was like all of this thing. And so I really loved living in New York City, because I also, you know, found out about the cultures within all of the African countries. And then, you know, some of the Caribbean countries. Like, it became a whole like learning curve for me. But I'm so thankful for it, because especially my oldest 2 children had the opportunity to really meet people and learn about people, who they were and their particular heritage or culture. And it wasn't like just this group of people, which I feel like, if you don't live on one of the coasts, is very easy, especially and you all are academics, so especially with today's academic setup, you know, it's so easy to kind of breeze by, or so many of our kids have kind of just, you know, gotten this overview, this high arc, not realizing that, hey, Africa is not a country. Like, it's a continent. And there are many, many countries within it who are completely different from one another. They look completely different. Like, they're totally different people. And so I think as we start, one thing, you know, that we mentioned earlier was about how, you know, maybe when we were coming up, we were looking up in those encyclopedias. One thing I do appreciate about the technology and the ease of information today is that it's so accessible, that we have that opportunity to have those conversations and look something up, you know, right in our phone. So yeah, I definitely appreciate it. You ladies have been amazing. I definitely am super excited about all the things that you've taught us today. And I am going to go purchase some books and follow some new podcasts, cool people that we get to do. How can people get in touch with you if you want them to follow you or email you, or if you have a website or anything that you want to, you know, put on as Yulee was just doing? How can people get in touch with you? Yulee, we'll start with you.
All right. Well, I am not one of those people who can build my own website, so I do not have that. But you can find me on socials. I'm on Facebook as Yulee Lee. I'm on Instagram as Yulee Lee. You can find me on Twitter. I think I'm PhD Yulee on Twitter. And my email is Yulee at stuffyoucanuse.org. So you can email me and we can have a conversation anytime.
Love it. Thank you, ma'am. Linda, what about you?
Yeah, I also cannot build a website or maintain one if I had one. So you could also find me on Facebook. I think my handle is Dr. Linda Moon on Facebook. And on Instagram, it's _Linda Luna, because unfortunately I couldn't get my full name. And I do have a podcast, like Yulee was mentioning. It's called Calling Water, and it's available where podcasts are available.
Calling Water. I love that. I'm going to have to go and follow you right away. This is what we're doing. This is what we are doing. Well, thank you, ladies, for hanging out with us tonight. Again, I'm super excited to celebrate this month with you all. Again, your time is appreciated, and I'm so thankful that I get to serve with you all and talk and hang out with you every week. It's like a party every week, every Monday. It starts my week off perfect. So thank you for being who you are. For everybody, please continue to listen, support these ladies, go hang out with them, and don't forget to keep and think about your sunny side view. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you soon.
My name is Sunday Joy, and thank you for listening to my mom's podcast.